Trying to build a little anticipation here and a little quiet, because it's my honor and privilege to introduce our very special guest today. And this is the biggest crowd that I've seen at lunch with the Savvy Seniors of Calabasas. And I want to thank all those folks in the steering committee and in the city of Calabasas that make this event possible. Thank you all, particularly Carol and Susan and the other Carol and a few of the other folks who literally spent a lot of time and hours literally worrying about even place cards and name tags and agendas on your table and so forth. So thank you all to the folks who make this event possible. But they also had this great idea to invite one of our dear friends and special neighbors just over the line from the city of Calabasas in Mountain View Estates. Our special guest speaker today is a shining example of what happens when you envision a goal, act on it, and see it evolve into the successful American dream. From the time he was a young boy growing up in small town Jackson, Tennessee, Wink Martindale, of course you know, wanted a career in radio and subsequently television. It was invented before him, but we all grew up with television as a novelty, if you think about it. Yeah. Everybody in this room saw the invention of television, so we're happy about that. And Wink has been involved with almost every part of the entertainment world. And when fortitude is evident and fame and fortune are sure to follow, you realize that you have to dedicate yourself to life goals, and he has certainly done that. In 2006, Wink was awarded his star on the legendary Walk of Fame in Hollywood. And just last year, he was among the initial class of inductees into the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame as well. I will tell you from personal experience, his leadership in the San Fernando Valley is legendary as well. From all of the years that he's emceed the Star of the Valley Awards that the Valley Economic Alliance provides every year since, I want to say, 1998 or 1999. So it's been a lot of years, but Wink has been our Star of the Valley as well as on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, as you can imagine. Just turning the pages of his self-penned, and I wondered about that word, but his autobiography, which I'm holding right here. And, you know, that in that autobiography, you'll see that Wink and Sandy, thank you for being here, Sandy, his wife of 37 years, have been happily living in Mountain View Estates, Calabasas, for almost 22 years now. And I wanted to let you know that this is available, number one, today, and Wink is here to sign your book and has agreed to be with us for as much time as it takes to get these out of the box and into your hands. And I want to tell you that, you know, it would take a year of Access or Extra or People magazine to have the fun that Carol and I have had in reading the beginnings of this book. We haven't gotten through it all. I got it just yesterday, but you can't put it down. So many pictures of so many people that you know, that, and so many stories that you'll remember. And you're going to hear Wink tell stories today. They're going to just touch your heart and make you remember some really great things. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Wink Martindale.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for the kind words. I'm not sure I deserve them, but I got a spot on my elbow where I had an accident last weekend in a car on Malibu Canyon Road, and I don't think I deserve that either. You look surprised when I came in today. Some of you did. You expected, I think, Bob Barker, perhaps Alex Trebek, or Pat Sajak. Let me tell you, they work far too expensively. They speak by the word. I am much less expensive. Dennis, thanks again for the introduction, Mr. Mayor. I came in today and he said, "Wink, you're looking great." And I said, "Well, thank you very much, Dennis. I had just seen him on Monday." But then I thought, the three stages of man are youth, middle age, and gee, Wink, you're looking great. So if anybody ever gives you a compliment like that, pay no attention to him. And when his wife, Carol Washburn, gave me a call several weeks ago and asked me to be here, she began by, well, in a strange sort of way. She said, "Do you believe in the Constitution of our country?" I said, "Well, of course I do. I'm an American." "Bill of Rights?" "Yes." "You believe in free speech?" I said, "I sure do." She said, "Well, good. You're making one Wednesday, March 20th at the Calabasas Country Club. Be there or be square." I swear she said that. In all seriousness, it is a pleasure to be your guest today for this Savvy Senior Kickoff Luncheon. Let me tell you why I know I belong here today. Because I wondered in the beginning, do I really be a senior? Well, after the invitation from Carol some weeks ago, I Googled the word seniors, and I found my name at the top of the list. But just to be sure I was a certified senior, I went to my old Webster's Unabridged, and I looked under the word senior, and there was my picture. So I know for sure I am in the right place today. Incidentally, I think comedian Jeff Foxworthy got the subject of aging just right. He said, "You know you're getting older when you bend down to touch your toes and you ask yourself, what else can I possibly do while I'm down here?" I love that. The truth is, we're all getting a bit older, right? Shake your hands if you're, yeah. As for me, I'm a lot like the old Mississippi River. The older I get, the harder it is to control my water. I want to see a show of hands, if I may. Who in the audience has been married the longest? Let's begin with 40 years. Who's been married 40 years? All right, how about 50 years? Dare I go to 60 years? Ah, about 100 years. Stop. Don't push it when you... Wife over here says, "It seems like it." Here's my reason for asking. I heard this at dinner last night, and I thought I'd share it with you because I loved it. The story of the elderly lady who was arrested for shoplifting. And when she went before the judge, he said, "What did you steal, ma'am?" She said, "Just a can of peaches, Your Honor." And the judge said, "Well, why did you do that? You knew it was wrong." And she said, "Well, very honestly, sir, it was because I was hungry." And the judge said, "How many peaches were in the can?" She said, 6. He said, "That's fine. I'll give you 6 days in jail." But before the judge could render punishment, the lady's husband of 62 years stood up. And the judge said, "What would you like to say, sir?" And the husband said, "I just want you to know she also stole a can of peas." Don't you love it? You gotta love it. I'd be remiss if I didn't have you meet my bride of 37 years, who Dennis mentioned a few minutes ago. Sandy, will you feel like standing up? We did have an accident on Malibu Canyon Road last Friday, and she's been pretty stored. I read recently where somebody asked Harry Connick Jr., who's been married to his wife for 30 years, "What's your secret?" And he gave the same response that I've been using during our marriage. Harry said, "It helps to marry your best friend." I was fortunate to have done that. Well, I'm happy to say, so was I. As all of you know, the longer you're together, the better you think, with the accent on the word think, the better you think you know your spouse. But that's not always the case. During dinner in, I think it was one of the finer restaurants out here in Calabasas, last August 2nd, we were celebrating our 37th, and I said, "Honey, 37 years ago, we had a cheap apartment, we had a cheap car, we slept on a sofa bed and watched a 10-inch black and white television. But every night I got to sleep with a young 30-something. And now we have a beautiful home in Mountain View Estates, a couple of nice cars, a nice big oversized bed and plasma screen HD TV. But now I'm sleeping with a 60-something. Now things have really changed over the years, sweetheart." To which my wife the terrific and reasonable woman that she is, said, well, Mr. Wink, let me tell you this. If you like, here's what you should feel free to do. You go out and find yourself another 30-something, and I'll make damn sure that once again you'll be living in a cheap apartment, driving a cheap car, sleeping on a sofa bed, and watching a 10-inch black and white television. Women really know how to solve those midlife crises, don't they, guys? But Sandy's claim to fame truly is that she dated Elvis for about 6 years, but then she met me, and folks, you're looking at the one who's still standing. The truth is, when she discovered I could sing Hound Dog better than the king of rock and roll, she chose me. Whoever said if you find something you like to do, you'll never have to work a day in your life must have had me in mind. Because from the time I was old enough to listen to the radio, I wanted to be on the radio. I was extremely fortunate as a kid. When anybody asked me what I wanted to be when I got big, I didn't say policeman, fireman, or doctor, like most kids would. My response never wavered. I wanted to be on the radio. Without question, my fascination with radio began when I was 7 or 8 years old. I'd come home from elementary school every day, West Jackson Elementary School, and listen with my mom to her soap operas on the radio. 3 o'clock every day, Stella Dallas, Young Widow Brown, When a Girl Marries, Lorenzo Jones and his wife Belle, The Romance of Helen Trent. Remember those, ladies? Huh? You're older than you look. They were part of our daily lives back in the day when TV was still years away. My personal favorites were Frank Sinatra on Your Hit Parade on Saturday night, followed by the Grand Ole Opry out of Nashville. Sunday, it was Gene Autry's Melody Ranch. I knew all the words to Back in the Saddle Again. Little did I know that years later I'd be working for the cowboy for 12 years at his wonderful Station of the Stars, KMPC. At night, I'd fall asleep with the sounds of Jack, Doc, and Reggie and I Love a Mystery ringing in my ears. There was Gangbusters and Mr. District Attorney, champion of the people, guardian of our fundamental rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know the words, too. But do you know these? When Jay Jostin said at the beginning of the show, "And it shall be my duty as District Attorney not only to prosecute to the limits of the law all persons accused of crimes perpetrated within this county, but to defend with equal vigor the rights and privileges of all its citizens." Now, the fact that I can still recite that opening is amazing, considering there are times when I cannot remember my own name. But it speaks, I think, to just how enthralled I was as a kid with radio, truly the theater of the mind. And a little sidebar, I'd like to add this. When I used to get off the air at KFWB, when I was a rock jock on Hollywood Boulevard, I'd go downstairs at 9 o'clock in the morning and have my breakfast and coffee. And every day I would see a gentleman saunter by, an older gentleman with a cane. And I found out it was Jay Jostin who played Mr. District Attorney. And one morning I got up the intestinal fortitude. I didn't want to bother him, but I just wanted him to know how much I enjoyed him as a boy. So I walked outside of Aldo's restaurant. And I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Jostin?" And in that mellifluous voice, he turned and said, "Yes." Wonderful voice. I said, "You don't know me from Adam, sir, but my name is Wink Martindale, and I'm a radio guy upstairs. And I just want you to know how much I enjoyed Mr. District Attorney every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock on CBS. And you would have thought that I had written him a check for $1 million. He said to me, after thanking me and after we exchanged some pleasantries, he said, "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" And I said, "Could you?" I said, "I'll buy you a cup." We went in, sat in a corner of Aldo's restaurant, and for 2 hours he regaled me with stories about the grand old days of radio, something that I will never forget. And I'm so glad that I went out to say hello to him that morning, because 2 weeks later, he was dead. Another prime reason for my love of radio might have been that the metropolis of Memphis was just 85. It would seem like a metropolis to me. 85 miles from my hometown of Jackson, which was a small West Tennessee town of about 25,000 people in those days. I knew that radio was likely my ticket to get to Memphis. I was one of 5 kids who grew up in a small 3-bedroom home, 1 bathroom, no shower, just a tub to take a bath, with water that had to be heated on a wood stove. The Martindales were anything but rich in material things, but that was okay because we knew that, well, the truth is we didn't know what we didn't have, so it really didn't matter. We had each other, and that was the most important family ingredient. My dad was a hardwood lumber inspector working for a very modest salary. My mom was somehow able to weave a certain kind of magic when it came to making ends meet. Sadly, my dad's routine would be to take his $70 check on Saturday afternoon, payday, go downtown to Joe's pool room and drink beer after beer after beer until he could hardly walk home. Too often, by the time he staggered up the front steps, most of his paycheck was long gone. And this left my mother with very little money to buy groceries and pay bills the following week. But some way, somehow, she always made a dollar go just far enough to make it through the week. And today I'm happy to stand here and tell you that as my dad grew older, he said goodbye to his drinking. And when he died in 1969, well, he became the kind of father that Mom and us 5 kids knew he could be during his latter years. I'd like to share with all of you a touching remembrance of my mom, but not just my mom, to all mothers, yours and mine. Words that may hit the bullseye with you as they do with me. This is a thing that's simply called I owe you. You know, most people look through their wallets or their pocketbooks, and way down at the bottom, past the credit cards and baby pictures, you usually find a little old dog-eared piece of poetry. I was cleaning out my wallet the other day, and I ran across a whole bunch of IOUs. Some of them 40, 50 years overdue. And the funny thing is that all of these IOUs are owed to one person. And right now might be a good time for an accounting. Mom, I owe you for so many things. A lot of services. Like night watchman for lying awake at nights listening for coughs and cries and creaking floorboards and me coming in far too late. You had the eye of an eagle, the roar of a lion, but you always had a heart as big as our old house. Mom, I owe you for services as a short order cook, chef, baker, for making sirloin out of hamburger, turkey out of tuna fish, and for 4 big strapping boys out of leftovers. And I owe you for cleaning services, Mom, for the daily scrubbing of face and ears, all work done by hand, mind you, and for the frequent dusting of a small boy's pants to try to make sure he had led a spotless life, and for washing and drying up the tears of childhood, and for ironing out the problems of growing up. I owe you for service as a bodyguard, Mom, for protecting me from the terrors of thunderstorms and nightmares and too many green apples. And Lord knows I owe you for medical attention, Mama, for nursing me through measles, mumps, bruises, bumps, splinters, and spring fever. And let's not forget medical care, too. You know, important things you taught me, like don't scratch it or it won't get well. If you cross your eyes, the most important of all is going to stick like that. And how about this one? Be sure you got on clean underwear, boy, in case you're in an accident. That hits home for all of us. And I owe you for veterinarian services, for feeding every lost dog I dragged home at the end of a rope, and for healing the pains of puppy love. I owe you for entertainment, too. Entertainment that kept a household going during some pretty rough times. For wonderful productions at Christmas time, in the backyard on the 4th of July and birthdays, and for making make-believe come true on a shoestring. I owe for construction work, for building kites, confidence, hopes, and dreams. And somehow, you made them all touch the sky. and you cemented a family together so it would stand the worst kinds of shocks and blows. And you laid down a good, strong foundation to build a life on. I owe you for carrying charges, for carrying me on your books for the necessities of life that growing boys gotta have. Things like a pair of high-top boots with a little pocket on the side for a jackknife. And one thing, Mom, I'll never forget. At Sunday dinner, when there were only 2 pieces of apple pie left and 3 hungry people, I noticed you were the one who suddenly decided you really didn't like apple pie in the first place. These are a few of the things for which payment is long overdue. And the person I owe them to worked very cheap. She managed by simply doing without a lot of the things she needed herself. My IOUs add up to much more than I could ever hope to repay. But you know the nicest thing about it all? She'll mark the entire bill paid in full for just one kiss. One kiss and 4 little words. You probably know what those words are. Mom, I love you. I was 17 years old and just out of high school when my dream of a job in radio came true, thanks to my Sunday school teacher who just happened to manage one of the local stations. It took me less than 2 years to make my way to Memphis and the #1 station in the city, WHBQ, which happened to be the station that Dewey Phillips worked for, who was the DJ, who was the first to ever play an Elvis Presley record. I would stay for 7 years at WHBQ, not only in radio, but the chance to move into the new medium of television. The station's manager became my mentor. Mr. John Cleghorn convinced me to complete my college education at the University of Memphis, from which I was graduated in 1957, with a major in English and drama and a minor in journalism, all of which helped me greatly during my career over the years. But Mr. Cleghorn had a profound influence on me in those days. During my sophomore year in college, when I was elected president of my class, he wrote me a note which meant a great deal to me, and I've kept it all these years. It was dated March 28, 1955, and it read thusly: Dear Winston, it's my name. I make it a practice to congratulate other people when they receive an extraordinary honor. But if you don't mind taking advice from an old man, the secret of continuation of your popularity is to remember, if you want people to like you, you have to have a genuine love for the human race. And then he concluded the note with, it's a pleasure to have you on the station. Sincerely, John Cleghorn. Needless to say, Mr. Cleghorn's note impressed me greatly as it said a lot in just a few words. Now, as I stand before you at this stage of my life, I'm convinced I was called to a career in the media. Otherwise, I can't possibly explain all of the good things that have happened to me in this business that I've been a part of for over 60 years. A business that can be such a strong influence, good and bad, over so many of us. We're living in an awesome age of communication. As you know, the late President Ronald Reagan was originally another product of radio, starting in sports in WHO Des Moines. He later became known as the Great Communicator. And he loved to tell stories, and he told a story about, I love this, about the sports announcer who invited a young baseball-playing friend over for dinner one evening, and while the wife was busy preparing dinner, the 2 sports buffs were talking sports, of course. But when the baby started to cry, the wife said to her hubby, honey, will you please take a minute and change the baby? Well, the hubby was a bit embarrassed in front of his jock friend. He said, change the baby? Honey, you must be kidding. I'm a ball player. That's not something that I know how to do. To which his wife wheels around and she put her hands on her hips and she proceeded to communicate to him. She said, look, Buster, you lay the diaper out like a diamond, you put second base on home plate, put the baby's bottom on the pitcher's mound, hook up first and third, slide home underneath, and if it starts to rain, the game ain't called, you start all over again. One of the best from Ronald Reagan. God bless him. In 1959, after Mr. Cleghorn brought about my transfer from Memphis to Los Angeles and RKO, one of the high spots in my career occurred. I made a record titled Deck of Cards. It caught the public's fancy and went on to sell over 1 million copies. And as a result, in November of that year, I was invited to New York to perform Deck of Cards on the old Ed Sullivan show, and I can still remember that intro.
You're headed for the Ed Sullivan Show, named America's #1 variety program, starring the nationally syndicated columnist of the New York Daily News, Ed Sullivan.
Thank you. Now, here's a very attractive young fellow from Memphis, Tennessee. His name is Wink Martindale, and he has one of the top records of the season. I'm sure you've heard it on radio. So let's have a very nice hand for Wink Martindale, won't you?
That was my introduction that Sunday evening in the fall of 1959 as I nervously stood on the same stage on which performers ranging from circus clowns to the entire Russian ballet had performed. From Senor Wences to Elvis and the Beatles, my 23-year-old knees began to buckle, and frankly, I wondered if I would be able to get through this in front of millions across the country watching on CBS. It was an awesome feeling for a country boy from Jackson, Tennessee. I thought about all those Sunday nights I'd sat glued to the TV screen to see a singer like Patti Page or Teresa Brewer or Elvis perform their top-selling hits. And now me on the same stage and in the same theater that would much later see its marquee change from the Ed Sullivan Theater to the David Letterman Theater. The odds of me enjoying the fruits of a top 10 hit record and performing it on Toast of the Town, the Ed Sullivan Show, were tantamount today to hitting the lottery, big time. As I've grown older, on occasion, someone will ask me if I'd ever considered retirement. And my standard reply is one I plagiarized from Art Linkletter. Retire from what? I'm not tired. When being in radio was just a dream for me, it was the legendary Art Linkletter, and I must say Arthur Godfrey as well, who influenced me greatly. With no false modesty, it was Art who once said, quote, "I was Oprah before there was Oprah." I think we'll all agree. As you know, this man had an incredible talent for interviewing kids, getting them to open up and say funny things. One day, Art asked a little boy on house party what religion he was, and the kid thought for a minute, and he said, "I always forget whether we're Catholic or prostitute." Art said it best, kids do say the darndest things. Art's daughter just happens to be here today, and I'd like to introduce her to you. Ladies and gentlemen, residents of Calabasas for a long time, Sharon Linkletter and her husband, Art Hershey. Would you take it? There they are, right over there. Also at the same table, I want you to say hello to another popular couple, longtime residents of Calabasas, Ross and Lynn Porter. Ross was Vin Scully's partner for 28 years broadcasting Dodger games. Ross, Lynn, if you will, please. I know it's tough to get up after eating all that food. I saw how much you had. And I want you to meet Bill and Karen Smith. Bill was in TV news for years at Channels 5 and 11. Karen, as a teenager, was a daily dancer on my Wink Martindale dance party at the old Pacific Ocean Park down in Santa Monica. Karen and Bill, would you stand up? And a special thank you to Karen and Bill because they were there for us the other night when we had that wreck over on Malibu Canyon Road. And at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, they were still in the hospital over there in West Hills with Sandy and me. And we got back home. They went home, got ready to go to bed, and Sandy realized she had to go back to the hospital. They got dressed again, came back, took them back to. So all that was over around 5:30 in the morning. So I thank you both once again publicly for that. I feel I almost have to touch briefly on the subject of game shows. In the department store of life, I've enjoyed being in the toy department. That's my stock answer to why I've been either hosting or producing games since 1965, Michael. But I think Bob Barker's excuse for not pursuing another line of work is so good he ought to bottle it and sell it to the rest of us so-called hosts. Bob, a millionaire many times over, now retired, once lovingly said of his profession, and I quote, "I give away refrigerators for a living. I don't sing, I don't act, I don't tell jokes, I don't dance, and it's too late for me to learn now because I'm a star." You gotta love that. My most successful game show was Tic-Tac-Dough, which I hosted for almost 10 years. In the fall of every TV season, we did an over 80s tournament with all the contestants over the age of 80. And I'll never forget this one lady. Her name was Dr. Reba Kelly. She was 87 years young, and as a widower, I said to her, "Dr. Kelly, at your advanced age, do you ever think about dating again?" And without blinking an eye, I guess these words were given to her by the producers. I never found out, but she didn't take a breath. She said, "Wink, actually, I have 4 boyfriends." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes, I get up with Will Power. I take a walk with Arthur Itis. I come home with Charlie Horse. And I go to bed with Ben Gay." Our biggest winner on Tic-Tac-Dough was Tom McKee. He was on for 48 straight days, won over $317,000 and 8 cars, one of which he gave to his brother, a missionary in Africa. Then he sold the other 8 cars and bought a big Mercedes with a vanity license plate, Tic Tac, which he still has to this day. I stay in touch with Tom. He's in real estate, very successful back east. But to be a little more serious, I'd like to share a true story with you that proved to me big time that game shows mean more than we might think to some people. A few years ago, Sandy and I were attending a large patriotic charitable event at the Universal Sheraton Hotel. And during the silent auction, a gentleman came up to me and said, "Wink, I'd just like to tell you what my brother would say if he were here this evening." He said, "My brother was quite possibly your show's biggest fan. He loved Tic-Tac-Dough. He loved it with a passion, so much that when he was stationed at the naval base in San Diego, time and again he'd drive up here all alone on weekends to watch your show being taped at CBS. He was thoroughly addicted to the show. Finally, it got to a point where tapings, just watching wasn't good enough. My brother wanted to be a contestant. He wanted to play the game he loved so much. He wanted to play for real. So he auditioned for Barry and Wright, the producers, over in Century City, and he was selected as a player. For him to be on the show was akin to an out-of-body experience, this gentleman said. And as I began to truly sense what a big deal this was to his brother, I said, I'm sure I can get your brother DVD copies of those shows that he was on. And he thanked me for the offer, but told me that sadly his brother was no longer with us. It was then that Brad Burlingame told me that his brother, who loved my show so much, was Chick Burlingame, the American Airlines pilot of Flight 77, who lost his life 9/11 when his plane was hijacked and forced to fly into the Pentagon. Brad's revelation that evening made me realize more than ever that when the red light goes on, those of us in front of the camera never know to what extent we might be touching another person's life. I think it's safe to say most everybody in this room is a parent. So I want to leave you today with some very special words. I first heard these several years ago through a recording by the great one, Jackie Gleason. This is a reminder as young parents, we enjoyed the privilege of living under the same roof with our children for just a little while. Because almost before we realized it, they were out the door, weren't they? They were gone and living under their own roof. So with that in mind, let me share with you some remembrances of a loving father, perhaps just like you fathers in the room. I'll wager many of you dads will relate to this. Dear daughter, I tiptoed into your room tonight and I looked down at you smiling in your sleep. And you were so lovely, my heart nearly broke. And I thought to myself how very much like Sleeping Beauty a little girl is. When I tuck you in at night, I never know quite how old you're going to be when you wake up. One evening, you crawl into your dad's lap and you throw your precious little arms around his neck. The next morning, you may be much too grown up for that sort of thing. You're so quickly approaching the awkward age, too young to drive the car, and yet too old to be carried into the house half asleep on Daddy's shoulder. I have a secret I never told you, Sleeping Beauty. You're going on an exciting trip. You'll travel from yesterday all the way to tomorrow. It's a rapid journey, and you'll travel light, leaving behind you your measles, mumps, freckles, bumps, bubble gum, and me. And I promise you I won't feel hurt when you discover the world's a little more interesting than your dad's lap. Yesterday you were blue-jeaned and pigtail, the neighborhood's best tree climber. Tomorrow you'll be blue organdy and ponytail, and you'll view the world from a loftier perch, a pair of high-heeled shoes. Yesterday, you could mend your doll's broken leg with a hug. Tomorrow, you'll be able to break a boy's heart with a kiss. Yesterday, you could get lost one aisle away from me in the supermarket. Now I have to worry about losing you down another aisle to some handsome young man. Sleeping Beauty, when you grow up and out of my arms, when you finally get too big for my shirts, I'll still recall how you used to scatter dust and dolls through every room in the house. But you spread a lot of sunshine, too. Of course, the dust is settled. Your mom has long since picked up the dolls. But that sunshine will always fill the corners of our hearts. So here I am, just talking in your sleep. Because if you saw this look on my face, you'd laugh. And if I spoke with this lump in my throat, I'd cry. Yes, daughter, when I looked at you tonight, you were a sleeping beauty, and so I tiptoed over and I kissed you. You didn't wake up, and I knew you wouldn't, because according to legend, only the handsome young prince can open your eyes, and I'm only the father of the future bride. So slumber on, my lovely. Tomorrow when you wake up, you'll be a young lady and you won't even realize you've changed courses in the middle of a dream. But you might notice a little change in your dad. I'll look a little different somehow, a little sadder, a little wiser, but a whole lot richer. Tonight, I kissed a princess, and I feel like a king. That's to a Sleeping Beauty. Joel Osteen always begins his Sunday talks with something funny, so I'd like to leave you with something funny that he recently opened with. The kid wanted to borrow Dad's car, and Dad said, on 3 conditions: keep your grades up, read the Bible, and cut your hair. A month later, the son asked again. The dad said, you've done the first 2, but you haven't cut your hair. Son said, but Dad, Moses had long hair, so did Samson and Jesus. They all had long hair. Dad said, yes, and they walked everywhere, too. It's been a pleasure to spend part of this day with all of you. I'd like to think that all of us seniors are indeed as savvy as can be. I appreciate your organization here in Calabasas and the fact that the city is solidly behind you. I'd like to leave you with these 2 thoughts. When you take of a man's money, you've simply taken a part of his wealth. But when you've taken up a person's time, you've taken a part of his life. And I thank you today for your time. And finally, it really doesn't matter how it ends for me. All that matters are the hearts and minds we touch along the way. God bless you all. God bless our great country, and if I may say so, especially Calabasas. Thank you very much.